Good afternoon, everybody. As Stephen said, my name is Michael Macliver. I'm from a company called Triumph Business Systems in Perth, Western Australia. We've been long-time DataFlex developers. We develop a single application in the business space, I guess an ERP, enterprise resource product. And what I want to talk about today is just one of the aspects of our product that we've been doing around the web app. This all started by one of our larger clients who's a pet product wholesaler wanting to do a little bit more with their order processing. So they wanted to be more accurate and have a better process. And some of that was that some of the products that they deal with, especially in the pharmaceutical area, might be $100 or $200 worth. And if they send out that by accident or the wrong product, it's cost them a lot of money. And even though they were checking some of these orders 2 and 3 times, they were still finding that they were getting it wrong. So we needed to work a way to improve that for them. So what we came up with was the idea of having a paperless picking warehouse, basically. And we wanted to do this, when we first thought about it, we said we don't want to have an offline solution. We don't want to load data onto something and load it back again or whatever. We just wanted to be fully integrated. So we thought one of the nice ways to do it would be on a wireless type mobile scanner, such as this one here. And some of the things that we said, let's make it an Android. I don't like the idea of Windows on a scanner. I'd rather have an Android type product. Not that that's a really big deal. It needed to be HTML5. It needed to be touch screen with a certain resolution, so at least you could see what was going on. I should have started that off earlier. I wanted to have a numeric keyboard so that, as well as having a touch screen, you could use the numeric keyboard to efficiently put stuff in, like a quantity value or potentially a product code. And it needed to be rugged so that if you dropped it in the factory, it was still going to work after you dropped it a few times, hopefully. So the other thing that we decided is that the best way to achieve what we wanted to do was using the DataFlex web application. And I guess there are a number of reasons for that, is that we could leverage off the existing code that we had, the classes and the BPs that we had already built into our framework. It works on the live data, which is what we wanted to achieve, not a batch sort of import. And it supported multiple devices, so moving forward we could do other things with it. So it just needed to have a browser and connectivity. And we also had a reasonable amount of web app experience, so that fitted in well. In 17.1 and DataFlex 18, we've got a B2B e-commerce type web shop. That's just part of a snapshot of the web shop there. Unfortunately, that's not a responsive design one. But we also had just done a project in 18.2, and although this was a desktop application that we wrote, web requisitions thing, we decided that we were going to write it in the mobile framework. A couple of reasons for that is to give us the experience in the mobile framework, but also the fact that maybe this particular customer didn't want that, but who knows what was going to happen in the future. So we just thought it was a better way to go. So even though it was on desktops, we sold it to the customer like that, and they were pretty happy. So we had a reasonable amount of experience already. And then we looked around and said, okay, so what sort of hardware can we put this on? And the particular supplier I was dealing with at the time recommended the Intermec Cen51, which is the little picture there, which is a really neat device. So it's strong and it's robust. It's got a good quality scanner in it. Can handle input at the view level. So what that means is that when I actually use that particular scanner, I don't have to have a form on the screen. It's like the scanner puts the information or the characters into a keyboard buffer, and I can then behind the scenes read that keyboard buffer and get that information out. So that was quite useful. One of the downsides of that particular product, though, is it was fairly expensive. So it was, starting at about $2,200 US up to about $3,000. And the reason I got the range there is when you buy that product, you don't get everything with it. So if you wanted the cradle, it was an extra couple of $100. If you wanted the scan handle, it was an extra $300. If you wanted something else, so it did tend to add up. So anyway, using that device, we designed our first paperless picking application, which looked a little bit like that. which was really to allow the guys in the warehouse to basically be given a picking slip to go and do, and it would take them through product by product where they had to go, allow them to scan the product, identify that they had the right product, and then they could do multiple scans or they could put in a quantity if they needed to. And that was working really well, and that's what we've got out in the field with some of the clients. But I had some other new clients come along and I found it was difficult to get a hold of the old scanner. So we said, okay, let's have a look around and see what else we can get. And this particular one here was the model that we settled on after we had actually tried quite a few of them. We even looked at ones where you could take your iPhone or your iPod and stick it in a little cradle which had a scanner on it and do that sort of stuff. I found them to be okay, but not as good as this, and also in the end it was fairly expensive. The other thing is, we looked at the Linear Pro, which was good for a particular size of iPhone, but if you had a plus size or anything else, it just wasn't going to work with it. So I didn't think it was that great in the end as a solution. Some of the pros of this one is that it's a, I think I got the cost in the wrong column there. Some of the pros, it's a lot cheaper. So this particular one here is about $1,100 US, but it comes with 4G. It comes with a scan handle, which has got an extra battery in it. It comes with a cradle, so it comes with a lot of other extra things for that sort of price, which is really good. Some of the cons is I'm not convinced that this is as robust, even though they sell it as robust. I haven't tested it. I'm not sure where the certification in terms of robustness, but it has the same sort of certification, but I still have question marks on that. But one of the big differences between this and the original one is that it doesn't have the same sort of keyboard input handling. So that, and even on the Pro Linear, I found the same. And when we had a look at a lot of the other scanners, they were similar. So the difference was you had to have a form on the screen to be able to capture the scan that you're doing. So that made a few interesting adjustments for us. So when we have a look at the first design, we have all the buttons down the bottom. And with the chainway one of the things is because we have a form on there, the keyboard pops up. So immediately we lost all the buttons, so we had to redesign the stuff. So in the end, our second revision was that we decided that we would have the buttons right up the top under the form where we're going to scan stuff in there. So not the usual sort of design, but it didn't matter what the information was below, you'd still be able to hit the buttons if you needed to move on to the next product or hit in a quantity and stuff like that. The old disadvantage of that, as you can probably see, is that a couple of things is when you have a form, especially with a scanner, you've got to force the focus back to that particular object all the time. Otherwise, if it doesn't have the focus and you go and scan something, people think they're scanning and it's not actually getting that information into a form. So you've got to force it back to there. The other big one, as we saw in that previous picture, is that we've still got to deal with this keyboard that keeps popping up, which was a really annoying thing. It would have been fantastic if we could have had control over the keyboard from within the browser, from in the HTML5 framework, but unfortunately there was no way to do that, even though we looked hard and we tried pretty hard to achieve it. One of the advantages by having the form in there is not only can we just scan a product, but sometimes products don't actually have a barcode on them, or possibly the barcode's not good enough to read. So the nice thing about that is that you can actually key the barcode or key a product code directly into that form, whereas in the previous design we had, you'd have to click a little button to say enter a separate barcode, because this one doesn't have one. So that was a little bit of an advantage that you had two things there. So how did we solve the keyboard? So the one with the keyboard, which again was really annoying, even though you can turn the keyboard off, you can turn the soft keyboard off on these sort of devices or any Android device, that's fine. But you never know when somebody wants to use it for other things. So it might not just be for our application. They might want to use it to use the web browser to look up stuff and that where they do need it. And then it becomes a bit of a pain to turn it back on again. So the solution that we looked for was we got somebody to develop us a separate pop-up keyboard, what we called a pop-up keyboard. So they developed an Android keyboard for us that we then loaded onto the device, and we just say that's the default keyboard. Yeah. And on the left-hand side there, you can see the result is that when the keyboard pops up, it doesn't actually pop up. It's just in the little tiny box down the corner. And of course, when you push the keyboard, when you need it, it will pop up, and you can put in whatever you want. And if you need to minimize it again, that you can minimize it. So the nice thing about that is it gives you the best of both worlds. So you can have, you can have it without the keyboard, and if you really need to get the keyboard, then you can pop it up. Ideally, everything would be numeric, and if it wasn't numeric, you would have a barcode so you could just scan it. Sorry?
Is it JavaScript that's what is built in for other?
The keyboard is actually built into the Android operating system. So the Android, it's just built in as an alternate keyboard. You can get lots of different alternate keyboards. You can say which one's the default. And even with that one, there's a button there that allows me to go back to the native keyboard, so you can rotate the keyboards. If you have a look at how emojis work, they're really just a separate keyboard with different symbols and stuff on them, and you can swap between a normal keyboard and an emoji keyboard. All right, so let's have a look at that product in operation. So we're actually going to be jumping onto our server in Perth, so the response side of things is probably going to be a little bit slow. But if I click on the paperless picking app, and I'll turn on this one at the same point in time. So I'll try and sort of do dual, but this is so small you guys aren't really going to see it, but I'll sort of do dual things. I mean, the neat one about this one is that I can just come along and hit the scan button. It's picked up who I am, it's logged me in automatically, and then it's listed the functions that I can do. So the little tiles there should look fairly, fairly familiar. They're just the mobile framework type tiles. Yeah. So when you log in, you get a couple of different choices. Depending on security, you can actually get to pick the picking slip that you're going to pick. If you don't have the right security, the system will actually just allocate you the picking slip that's next. And there's a management console to allow you to change the priorities. Particular first client we had also had different picking streams, so they'd have people picking for the metro versus people picking for the stuff that need to get delivered in country areas. And even within that, they had certain areas in the factory or in the warehouse. So they had people working on frozen goods, people working on pharmaceuticals, and people working on general goods. So they'd have at least 3 picking slips per order, and they would each come up for different people on the different scanners. So if I just pick out one of these particular orders, this one there, the first thing it does is just drill in and show me a little bit about that particular order. I can then hit the start button. And from that point there, it's actually telling me which particular product I have to go and pick. So one of the advantages that we found with this system as well is not only being more accurate and being more efficient, is that in a large warehouse, it takes somebody a hell of a long time to understand where everything is. So, they have to be there a fair while before they could be an efficient picker or even get the job as being a picker. Whereas now with the, with the actual machine that can guide you around, especially if you have busy time, say at Christmas, you could hire a university guy within a couple of days. He can be out there doing just as good a job as somebody that might have been doing a manual job for 5-10 years, because this is telling him where it has to go. It also has things about, it has a little picture of the product. It would have been nicer to have that bigger, but if you click on it, it'll actually give you more information about that product, etc. And then you can close it down and carry on your way. If I was on the scanner, I would just be scanning the product, and it won't let me move on until I've actually scanned a single product. Once I've scanned a product, there's some options in there. I can then say that's a particular quantity. So if I just manually keyed in a 0692, it would say, great, I've got one of those. I could scan the product again, it would count a second one, or if I was doing 5 or 6 of them, I could just pop up the quantity and say, I'm just going to add another one, and away we go. Once you've actually that didn't quite do what I wanted to do. Let's just put in that quantity again and add that. It should have picked 2. Once you pick the number that you required, yeah, I'll have to talk to Tom about that one. Once you pick the quantity that's required, it'll automatically move on to the next product. And if you're on the handheld, it actually vibrates and it makes a sound. So it makes a different sound if you've made an error. It makes a good sound if you've made the right thing and it's moving on, and it will vibrate for you, so giving you some feedback. And I'll just go back and talk about that a bit later as well. And then the rest of it is just really just repeating the same sort of thing, going over it. And I think we've only got 3. So at the end here, it then shows you a summary, and the base summary is, these are all the things that I haven't actually picked, so what's the difference? So maybe you missed something, maybe you forgot to look in the bulk warehouse where you could actually pick them up. So you still get an opportunity to go back and pick them if you wanted to. And if you want to show all products, you can. If you're happy with what you've done, you can hit the complete button and it will actually go and finish that picking slip off. It'll print out a packing slip, so you basically leave the goods, or you've got a trolley or whatever it is, you'll leave the goods, print out a packing slip, leave it with that, and then get on with the next job on the scanner to do the picking. Then leave it for the packing. In a bigger environment, a picker is worth a lot more money than a packer, so you want the picking person to be as efficient as possible. Leave the goods for another packer to do the job and get it all packed up. So pretty much that's the nature of it. So it's not an overly complicated application, but it works really well on the scanning type device. So once we've got that one under our belt, there was a number of other applications that customers started talking to us about and getting done, such as being able to use this instead of going out with the paper sheets to do stock takes. I can just bring up my stock take on this, go down the rows, scan the product, tell it how many I've got, and it's all integrated, which is fantastic. The other one now, you can do stock inquiry, so you can come up to a product, hit the inquiry button, see how much you should have quantity-wise and everything else about it, and make small updates. We also did one for another one of our clients that has quite a complex sort of stock arrangement, so they don't actually sell stock, they manufacture things, but they want to keep a track of the stock on the manufacturing floor, how much they've actually consumed. So we provided them with a similar type of application where they could scan the product, put in the quantity that they actually consumed in the manufacturing process, so it made it a lot easier for them. And I guess the last one that we haven't quite got to, but this is the most recent one we've been asked for, is that we have a number of, country-based clients. And so they'll have guys, farmers come in their truck and load up stuff, and they don't want to come in and waste time and walk in the shop. And traditionally, they've always signed on a piece of paper to say, yeah, they're the goods, I'll sign that, and away they go. So they want to move away from that. So we're looking at what we call a hybrid point of sale, where we can just scan the products the farmer's going to take away, and then at the end of it, allow them to just scan on the touch screen, which will be pretty cool. So a couple of things you need to know in terms of developing the stuff is that you need to have a good understanding of the mobile drill down type model and the navigation pathways. So everything that was shown off this afternoon, in fact, I think a couple of slides that should look a little bit familiar, which we covered this afternoon about that. So like Eddie was showing, it's very important to understand that navigation. A couple of things that we did on top of the standard framework, I guess, is that HTML5 has the ability to do things like vibrate on a device. So we built a class to help us do that, and likewise with the audio. We actually, one of the things we did with the audio is that we didn't want to just download a file every time because we thought that would be slow. So what we did is we took the file originally, encoded it into base 64 and sent it down on the browser. So that way it just sped it up. So it was just held in the browser, and every time it needed to make a sound, it didn't have to go back to the server and grab that particular file. A couple of other things I did want to say is we were very impressed. One of the clients, when we did the stock taking, one of the things that tripped us up a little bit is that they were going to wire, have their warehouse wired. And I just thought it was like, like at home, you get a couple of $100 router, your wireless router, you stick it in and away you go. But it seems like in a big warehouse, it doesn't work like that. So, you're looking at about $20,000 to get a reasonable sort of coverage in your warehouse and to do it properly. But even then, they didn't have enough time to do it before the stock take, so we're a bit stuck on that one. And one of the warehouses they had was a dangerous goods warehouse, and so they didn't have any electricity for obvious reasons in there, so we couldn't even plug in a router and stuff. So it was really nice to see that with these ones anyway, they just plugged in their SIM card into these and just went about their stock take over the, well, in Australia it's a Telstra mobile network, which seemed to work pretty well. I mean, it wasn't as fast as being Wi-Fi enabled, but it allowed them to do the stock take with about, they had about 4 scanners to go around it. So yeah, that was really good. I think that's the last page on the slide there. Just a couple of links. So if you want to find out some information about the Honeywell, originally it was an Intermec, and Honeywell had taken over Intermec, so it's now a Honeywell product. I think they've probably got their own products that they're pushing as well. This particular scanner here, which comes from China, is from a crowd called Chainway, and they've got a number of different products as well. The last thing is there's a little link there, so I've got Tom to zip up a workspace that has the sound and the vibrate JavaScript classes in there, and also the Android pop-up keyboard. So if you want that Android pop-up keyboard, then you can get a hold of it and use it, because that can be quite useful for things. Yeah. All right, I think that's everything I wanted to say. Has anybody got any questions? Yeah.
Did you consider any of the wrist-mounted scanners? Maybe it was on the wrist and you had a finger to scan with? Or?
We didn't really. We had a look at some of those scanners, but we sort of talked to our original client and said what they wanted to do, and they were quite happy with that. So that's the way we went. Yeah. And one of the things I must say is that we've had a fair amount of interest in terms of the paperless picking now and the way it's working. And we've got a number of clients that don't have that in sort of environments. They might be dealing with fish, or they might be dealing with other products. So they want to have a nice big touch screen that allows them to do a similar stuff, but on a big, basically touch Android screen, as opposed to having a handheld type beast. Yeah. Yeah, Michael.
On your paperless pick app, the pick list that you present to the user, is it sorted by warehouse location first?
Yes. So one of the important things is, they have to get their stock system in order. So, they have to have the pictures of their stock. They have to have the bin locations correctly labeled and stuff to go around.
Does the pick list optimize for walk distance?
The pick list optimizes based on what you've said is the sort of bin location route. So it's important for you to get the bin location route first. We don't do any geo mapping and say, okay, this is the best way to go. Yeah, the user has to decide what's the best.
And one last question. On your stock take, and your stock count, does it display the expected number on the screen whenever they get to the bin to scan it? No,
it doesn't. On the inquiry, it shows you when you do a stock inquiry, it does, but when you do a stock count, no, it doesn't show you. They just have to count whatever's in there. Yeah, yeah.
You scan things that were you found in a location that weren't supposed to be there. You're scanning at a bin location, then you walk out there, gee, I've got this here, it's not supposed to be here. How do you do that?
At this point in time, no. Yeah.
We did a thing called found in location, and you scanned it, it popped up and it came up with a reconciliation form.
Right.
Was misplaced.
Yep. Well, I mean, one of the things we did do for the scanning was extend that. So we have what's called a count point, so that you might have multiple places where a product is. So you can have 3 people going and scanning the same product, but at point A and point B and point C. Sometimes they're a bin location and sometimes they're not. But it means you can get a reconciliation afterwards and find out exactly where people have been and what they've been counting. If there's a discrepancy, where you might have to go back.
We do that by keeping inventory at the slot level. A slot being a bin in a rack that we keep separate inventories for every bin. So when you're inventorying an item, you scan the bin, you scan the item, give them the amount,
Yeah.
and you can have one product in 50 bins, and the system doesn't care, just adds them up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, I know it's late, so let's wrap it up there. But if you've got any other questions, come up and see me later. And if you want to get a hold of that stuff, just take a snapshot and you can get a hold and just download it. All right, thanks everyone.